Okay, let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is a presentation about hosting FRC events. So I'm Ann Shade. This is Isaiah Mariner here, and we've got Farrish Perlman. So I'm the logistics associate for Farrish Chesapeake. Isaiah is the FRC director, and then Farrish has been one of our longtime hosts as well. So we're going to hopefully get you some information on exactly what it takes to host. I'm going to go through the slides relatively quickly because these will be available to you all after the fact to refer back to. What I really want to be able to get to towards the end is to be able to answer your questions. So I want to make sure that we have some time to do that. Okay, so what are we looking for? As Farrish Chesapeake, we want to make sure that we can host events that are a great experience for the teams and the volunteers, right? So we are here to serve you and to make sure that the experience is great. Well, in order to do that, we need sites, right? We don't own any buildings, as much as we would love to own some buildings to be able to design something specifically for this. That's just not the reality of the situation, right? So we need your help to try to find some good locations that we can host a wonderful event for you. Okay? So some of the venue requirements. Some of the basic things. So one, we need a place for the playing field. And so generally speaking, we're looking for a space of 80 to 100 feet, 80 feet by 100 feet. So basketball court size. Important to have at least a 25-foot ceiling for those games that are shooting up into the air. It's always happened, but it does often. Bleacher seating, if we can find bleacher seating for at least 1,000 folks, that is the best case scenario. So 1,000 to 1,200 is like that nice sweet spot. Though we have made it happen for lower if we have to. Wired internet availability. So we have that wonderful FMS system that we need to connect to the internet, as well as a streaming unit so that those at home can follow along. The biggest thing with that is to have someone at the venue that we can contact and be in communications with while the field is getting set up to get all those settings set properly. Even better if they can be there the entirety of the event. Sometimes things pop up. Okay.
If you are working with public school, I'm specifically with every county, but this goes for most public school venues. You probably are going to need your in-house IT person working with your county folks. So we have a timeline that we run that our local IT in our school reaches out to our county folks, tells them when we're going to need released or whatever terminology they're using so that they can open those lines for the weekend. It inevitably takes about 110 emails, most of which go unresponded to, of which then the school has to get involved, and then you're dealing because they need to be opened on Friday. They have to test them, but they also have to try and do a test during the week when school's not in session because they lock everything down for the students. So just be aware that it's not just a quick fix. And so you definitely want somebody who is available and can definitely work with it.
Generally, the IT level that support that's provided for a school day is not what's going to be needed. And we do have some documentation to show exactly what that looks like, what the requirements are. So we also need some 20-amp circuits for the field area. 3 20-amp circuits are preferred. So to plug in all the field equipment. So like the scoring system and all of that fun stuff all gets plugged in that way. Floor covering. So Farrish Chesapeake provides the masonite that goes underneath the area for like where the playing field actually is happening. Outside of that, we prefer the venue provides the floor covering, and I'll go over that in a minute. We're adding now for this year that there's a stipend available for first-time hosts, which for this year, that's pretty much everybody because we're just implementing this year. So there's going to be a stipend for that to help with that process. And then access to the venue sound system. Yeah, we do come in with a sound system of our own that we can use. Generally speaking, the venue sound system is generally better than what we've got. The speakers that we have are relatively small. So for some of these larger venues, we're better off using the venue sound. So that's the playing field area. That's the area that most of you spend a lot of time in. We also have, for the other half of you that spend your time in the pit, we also have a pit area. So minimum of about 6,000 square feet. We try as best as possible to have at least 9x9 pits for everybody. Every once in a while, we have to go a little bit smaller, but it's really preferred not to, so at least 9x9s. 12-foot aisles are preferred if we can do that. 10 feet is the minimum, so we want to make sure that there's space for that, to lay that out. We're looking for space for 36 to 40 teams, minimum is 28. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at for that. And of course, don't forget that there's like pit administration tables, inspection tables and all that that need to go into that space. And so for those that are interested in hosting, we do help with that process to lay those things out. So don't feel like you have to do that all by yourself. Easy access from the pit area to the playing field. So this is one of those things to think about before you even fill out that application process, right? So we need to make sure that robots can get from wherever the pit area is to the competition area, preferably without having to remove bumpers, right? So double doors, if the stanchion in the middle can be removed, all of those kind of things. So think about the path of what a robot would take to go from that pit area all the way to where the playing field is, and as well as how it's going to get to the practice field, okay, if those are not in the same space. Again, floor coverings for the pit area, and we talked about there's going to be a stipend for that. And we're looking for at least 6 20-amp circuits for pit power, so that we can connect the teams to those circuits. And again, I talked about the doors with either no middle or removable stanchions. And as a tip, just because those stanchions are supposed to be removable doesn't mean they work. So verify with your venue to make sure that they are actually still removable. We have run into multiple situations where we think they're removable and we get there and oops, they lost the key, or it's broken, or it's bent, or whatever. Okay. Space for practice field, so generally speaking, you're looking at 20 to 30 feet. 20 feet by 30 feet is generally the space that First requests us to have. It doesn't have to be in the pit. Teams prefer if it is because it's easier, but it can be in like another oxygen or a hallway or a cafeteria.
We've done them in multiple, it just needs to be inside, please don't say that you're going to try and put a practice field out.
Yes. Yeah, because you can't control the weather. So there's also some other additional spaces that a lot of times you don't necessarily think about, but that are needed. So there'll need to be a judge deliberation room, usually about 20 to 30 people. It doesn't have to be team accessible, so it could be in a separate area. There needs to be up to 3 judges' rooms. So you're talking about like the interview rooms for impact award, dean's list, that kind of thing. So they should seat about 10 people. They do need to be accessible to the teams. Volunteer lounge. So usually you're looking to somewhere between 80 to 100 volunteers, especially on the days where the judges are in and working. So you want to make sure that you have seating for that. They don't need to be team accessible. Quiet room is one of those things that is more and more being used by teams, by mentors, by students. So First is requesting that we have that as many events as physically possible. So that's usually a classroom type of space. A prayer room also, for those who need those services. That's also very helpful. It doesn't have to be very large. Usually we've seen 5 to 10 folks use those rooms.
And they come and go.
And they do come and go. So there's specific times of the day with their prayers.
So it could be locked down on a different level, and you have to do it, so it could be unlocked just for prayer time and then.
Correct. And then an event office, so that's usually where like the event radios are stored, where the awards are stored, that kind of thing. And then there's an event meeting usually in the morning, for those key volunteers. You need the space to do that. And then, an area for the teams to eat. Okay, so, the cafeteria with some tables and chairs and that kind of thing. Even better if there's enough space in in that team eating area to be able to identify a particular space for each team, right? So you can label the table.
That has worked very well at a lot of events and people tend to like that. So just lay out an extra pit number somewhere and it helps.
Teams love to be able to load in all their things and leave it there.
Also, it helps you kind of control the flow because if you don't set it out, some teams have like 50 people and they will claim a very large space. And then when everybody else gets in, they're like, I don't have anywhere to sit now. So if you can get in front of it and do that, it does help prevent complaints later down the road.
But we also fully realize that not every venue is gonna have all of these spaces, right? So
Yeah.
we work with them, these are like all the great to haves, right? But if there's something in between, we're also obviously very willing to work with those that are willing to host. Parking, for sure that we wanna have some space for most of the teams are either gonna come in personal vehicles, or there's some amount of buses that come in, or like vans, that kind of thing. So we need parking for all those things, about 300 spaces or so. And then it's usually probably not even 30 buses, probably a little high. But something like 15 to 20 buses, that need to come in. Sometimes they stay, sometimes they don't, it just depends.
So I will say, the buses typically will come in and drop load, they'll drop in, because I'm thinking about when we're hosting an event, they'll come in, they'll drop, they typically will go off to a back area or down to our middle school happens to be walking distance, about 3 blocks away. And so we do all of the overnight parking for trailers are required to drop. They cannot drop in our parking lot because we need a lot of schools, especially in March, will be doing, there's so much going on at all of our schools, as you guys know. So it's typically being used for a spring play, for the mulch sale, for
SATs.
for SATs, which is always, so we try to make sure that every single spot is available. So trailers, buses, everything will always go to a separate site.
And that is something to think about too. So like,
As
if there's a local other
Anything.
parking lot, so like a middle school or church or something else that you can borrow those spots for a few days, especially for the teacher and for the tuition.
Church is on Sunday.
Yep.
But yeah. Next.
It's just something you have to have worked out with whoever else you're dealing with their space. Just make sure that, again, there's a timeline for most things. Make sure that you've contacted them a minimum of 30 days out so that it can go in all of the team information.
Yeah, all that stuff goes into the information, the website and all those things. So go back out to you all. So other optional services, so none of these are required, but again, they're nice to have. A machine shop. So if your team, for instance, is at your own location and you have your machine shop, you want to make it available to teams, that's fine. You just need to make sure that whatever process that you use, everyone has access, right? So like, you can't use your own machine shop and say, okay, no one else can use it.
I remember reading about this. You can't jump the line. If there's anybody that's in queue, if that's your home, you can't just go like, all right, well, I'm gonna go do this real fast because nah. Like you have to give whoever has signed up priority and then you can use what you've made available. If you don't make it available, you're not supposed to go in there.
You are joining the line like everybody else.
Yeah.
You have no special access, and that goes for everything else, right? So if you're hosting, you can't go to your machine shop and say like, oh, I forgot this part and I'm gonna go get it. Like, you can't do that. You load in like everybody else and then you don't have access to anything else. You can't give yourself a special classroom for your kids to meet at, if you're competing at that event, because no one else, unless you're gonna give every single team there a classroom to meet, those are the kind of things to keep in mind.
If you have the classes,
Have the classroom, you love that.
So if I can pause you there, what's your advice on competing at your own event?
so we've done that. We've done that every year. I will say it is a pro and con list of what you're willing to do. If you are going to do it, it is really 2 separate groups of folks that you're gonna be talking about. Your team and ex-mentors are going to be competing in the program. They're gonna do the check, everything that every team, when you go to any event, you're gonna be checking in, you're gonna be doing your thing. Those people are never going to most likely come to the side of where you're hosting. That's typically other mentors, your team parent volunteers that you're getting, the volunteers that are coming in. So I will say it takes me till about Wednesday to recover because I do cross the line between it. My team wants me to put a flag because I move so quickly during it. Because you're also running concessions, which is gonna be a whole different branch of this, which we haven't gotten to yet. So it is a trifecta of without a very large mentor and parent base that you can really call on that can split and kind of take these. Again, there are gonna be other volunteers that are coming in to help do this, but your load of like as a host team is actually a pretty decent sized load, especially first time. Once you get into a rhythm, it becomes, but your kids are going to wanna compete, but then some of them are also going to be needed to help potentially with field resetting or doing some things. So as long as you have a big enough group that can kind of be pulled to do kind of multiple things and everybody's in agreement that they're gonna do that, because like I'll see our kids just walking by and I'm grabbing them and I'm putting them because I need them here directing traffic. And as long as you all have had a conversation as a team about that ahead of time, it can definitely work.
I definitely would not recommend it for your first time.
No, not for a first. Get into it, have it, you know, I know that comes with its own issues because then it means you're involved 3 out of 4 weeks in March. So I get that wanting to do it, but for a first time host, I would definitely get your feet into it, and with just the hosting.
If you have the ability, my first year coaching, we were hosting, I didn't get to choose that, I just inherited that decision. Yeah, it was outrageous, so I wouldn't recommend doing that if it was your first go around, but at the same time, she brought up a good point. You gotta have some depth, because then you can do it, like, you don't have to have kids doing everything all day. I need
No.
like some kids that'll be willing to go and work concessions, safety glasses, yada, yada. And you know how culture is, people will step up and help some other stuff.
And it's different if you have a 20 team roster versus a 60 team roster. So we have a bigger team than I know that we have a requirement of if we're gonna host, then there's a sign up both for, there's an expectation that you're going to be helping with the event. So, but again, we've done this multiple times, but for a first year, I would definitely.
Would you say that, so when you say like first year, would you say that running FRC event is completely different than running like FTC?
Yeah.
It is far more taxing than running an FTC
Because I've
event.
done both. Again, we've done both, and yes.
Cause we did the FTC championship.
So FTC championship is a little bit closer.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're getting closer to it, but there's still quite a bit of difference with just the amount of staffing that's necessary.
Okay.
Because the number that should come, the number of people at FTC versus an FRC event are different, and especially when you start dealing with like food and other things, those numbers kind of skew this way a bit. And so that's the biggest thing that teams that have done FTC and then jump into FRC have found if they don't ask. So there have been some surprises in the past.
And so we talked about machine shops, and obviously if you're gonna do the machine shop, you need to provide adult supervision in that machine shop. We can't just assume that the kids are gonna be doing it. So you need to have at least 2 adults in there at all times. Mentor lounge is something that is appreciated, by many of you. So if you can provide one, then that's wonderful. Workshops, so if you wanted to do some additional things with sponsors in your area, or teachers that wanna do presentations, or teams that are involved wanna do presentations, whatever it is that you might wanna do, you're welcome to do that. We just wanna know ahead of time so that we can, let everyone know that that's what you're planning to do. Technology row, so that's generally, for sponsors, so whether they're your particular sponsors for your event or the First Chesapeake sponsors, so there's often opportunities for them to bring in cool things to show folks. But you'll have to coordinate with us on all those things. And then team social, so if you wanted to add, similar to what we just did at the district championship, so if you wanted to add a fun social event in one of the evenings, you'd be willing to do that. Again, those are above and beyond things. You don't have to necessarily do any of them, or some of them, whatever it is that you feel comfortable with.
On the workshops, because somebody brought this up earlier, I'm gonna push that a little bit more moving forward. And I think if it's something that if you're something you would think about, Friday night probably will be a better time to do something. Teams load in, whoever isn't loading in could attend the workshop versus on Saturday or Sunday. How many people are going to sacrifice time to go and do that on a regular FRC event? It's probably less likely that it will happen then. So just a thought, you can do it whenever you want, not a push, but I'm going to try to encourage people to do some things on Friday nights for other folks to come and see.
All of your guys' events, Saturday, Sunday here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for districts.
Yeah.
Can you get the next slide, please? Seeing you.
Sorry, too much.
So access and timing. So the equipment comes in for the event in 4 pods. So those 4 pods usually are delivered on Thursday, and I would love to tell you a particular time that they're going to be delivered, but pods does not tell us that. You are generally lucky to get a phone call before they get there. They're supposed to call us before they leave the warehouse. They usually do not. So usually it's a phone.
It's about a 15-minute out. We're almost there. They typically call me because I'm at the 495 River Road exit. I get the call and they're about 8.5 minutes. So that's usually the way it goes. So they get delivered on Thursday, and then they get picked up on the Monday after. So there needs to be a space provided to park those 4 pods. Preferably in a location that's going to be easy to load them in and out. So as most of you probably know, our equipment comes in these road cases, right, that are on wheels. So we wheel them out of the pods and into the school. So the shortest amount of distance that there is between the pods and the space where the main competitions are going to happen, then the easier the load-in process is.
There's nothing bigger than the road cases, right? And those were all pretty narrow.
They are relatively, yes, so the road cases are narrow.
I remember
They do
helping
fit-
with it, but
They do fit through standard doors.
yeah.
But again, generally speaking, you're gonna want a double door kind of situation, just to
So
make
that
it
you're not
easier to load in and out. There are times where the field components are not taken all the way apart.
Like this
So
season.
as much of that we can, remove at the end of an event. So we don't take them apart quite as much as like HQ would for like the regional events. So there are sometimes some larger pieces. So like last year, for instance, the top of the speakers were not taken apart. So they were a relatively large.
Listening, that's bigger, listening.
Yeah,
Maybe
maybe,
some-
and trying to get
Thank
the carpet.
That's
Really awkward. And so it's just as long as you have. the
You want at
door, we're
least a
not
double
going-
door,
That's-
if not a roll.
Yeah.
Field setup, we want to start as early as possible on Friday. That way there's time to get the field put together. Some years that's more critical than others. This past year was relatively simple to put the field together. There's other years where it takes forever. So if we can start, we prefer to start at 9 if we can. Some schools don't have that ability to provide us the main gym at that time. If we can do by noon, that's even more preferred. Sometimes we do later than that, sometimes. But I would highly recommend earlier the better, because then you don't stay as late that evening. So venue open times, those are the typical things that you guys have seen in the agendas before. So Friday as early as possible, usually you're there till about 10 to do the field setup. Saturday, you open at 6 a.m. so the volunteers can come in, and then you take full about 8. Sunday, you come in at 6. We usually hope to get the field finished and closed and the pods done by 9 p.m. Last year, we did pretty good with that at pretty much all of the events. So we were pretty close to 9 p.m. There are some years where it takes a little bit more to take fields apart, so it might take a little bit longer. The more hands that you have available for breakdown.
That breakdown, the more folks that you can have. And again, you want as many technical folks who potentially maybe could help with like a drive station, whatever, but as many hands as you have, because getting it set up, that has to be done prior to 5 o'clock with everything tested in there for teams to come in. So there are places where like, if you can literally just throw folks into there and their diet, and the practice field has to get set, that can be a whole, another subset. So the more you have, it just means the faster you can get through the setups.
And for setup and breakdown, it's even helpful with fresh pairs of hands, especially with breakdowns. So if you have the volunteers that have been there for 3 days and your team members that have been there for 3 days, they're tired, they're done, they want to go home. You can bring in some additional help. So a lot of times, like, teams will bring in the football team or the soccer team or the
National Honor
whatever
Society.
other clubs, right, that need volunteer hours, like, that's the kind of break them in.
A lot of schools have your seniors who are about to graduate and are missing, SSL, service learning hours or whatever it is called at those particular schools. They are always super helpful because they only need many hours.
So equipment needs, so these, as you notice, many other things are provided by First Chesapeake and they come in the pods. So anything that's the playing field elements, the border, the carpet, the FMS, projector and screen, the streaming equipment, all that stuff, all comes into the pod. You don't have to worry about any of that. The practice field and the practice field carpet, so First headquarters actually provides us those things. They get put in the pods and get delivered right to you. Extension cords for power distribution for the pits, that's also provided, and the cable protectors that you need to do that. All those cases that you've seen for inspection, for pit admin, for referees, for all of those things the volunteers need are all provided for you. So you don't need to do anything with that. Event signage and easels are also provided. There's also templates to print some additional signage if you need it. So if you need like directional signage to get restrooms or special rooms that you need or whatever, we provide the templates for all that. Provide the radios, provide TV displays, and there's probably other stuff that I forget that aren't even on that list. So as a host, we ask to provide somewhere between 20 to 40 folding tables. So those are generally used for like pit admin and inspections. That kind of thing, and actually, we might actually have that number go down this year. We're discussing whether or not we provide tables for the pit at all this year. Any opinions on that? Well, we have some of you.
Do you like use them? Do you like use them?
Most teams do not use them, is what we've seen.
So I guess maybe the question is plans for those that still do.
But we also have our own brain, like we bring an extra table and we could easily bring 2 tables instead of
So
one.
keep a lookout for that conversation to continue to happen and as we figure it out. But even if we do have, pit tables, you're looking at 20 to 40 folding tables that need to be provided for that. And then somewhere about 40 to 60 chairs. Again, that a lot of the field area people need chairs, and admin needs chairs, that kind of stuff. So if you're looking at, internet connection, we also need power. That's usually helpful. Wi-Fi is highly recommended, the 2.4 gigahertz kind of Wi-Fi, so we're not interfering with the field. Because nowadays, most of you are using, all kinds of tools for scouting and all those kinds of things. So if we can provide 2.4 gigahertz, that's kind of, and then floor protection. So as I said before, there's a stipend for students.
A lot of times, schools will already have, parks that you can potentially use, that they have for gyms and other things.
Quick question, just while you're here. The power is all 100 million, right? There'll be 240 circuits actually here. And then second, does it have to be a hardwired internet or? So something like hotspot or satellite, none of that?
Has to be hardwired. If FMS requires a hardwire, we don't have any way to get around that. That's a HV requirement.
Okay, well, is it like hardware would be provided to you, but on the other end to get onto the internet?
It's gotta go. Yeah, gotta be required. Okay, safety, security, and custodial services. So these are other things to keep in mind. So EMT services, so nurse and first aid are the minimum. Highly recommend having an EMT on site. There's just all kinds of things that most of you have no idea happen at venues, but that they are needed all the time. So it's highly recommended. Security and custodial services, you need to make sure that you have folks that are gonna clean the bathrooms, keep trash empty, you know, all those kinds of things. So you wanna make sure that they're there the entirety of the event, and then security is
Starting on
more.
Friday, not waiting to start Saturday, please start on Friday, and please start when teams enter the building.
And any of the costs associated with any of those things would have to be negotiated with First, Chesapeake ahead of time. And so generally speaking, when you all rent the venue, some of those things might be covered by whatever methods that you all have. If there are additional costs, we just need to know ahead of time, so we can budget for it. Next slide, please. Concessions, so it's another one of those things. This is a bigger thing than just a, you know, simple concession stand. So hosts are encouraged to provide concessions. It is not a requirement, but it's highly recommended. And it is one of the many ways that you all can fundraise for yourselves through hosting an event. Okay, variety of options. So the more variety that you can offer, the better. These kids will eat anything and everything that you put in front of them.
Starting from the
Teenagers,
times the doors open. So plan to have breakfast items and coffee going. I mean, mentors will drink coffee, parents want coffee, kids want coffee, they want breakfast, anything that you can start with, and they will eat basically until they leave your venue.
This is a great use of your parent volunteers, you know, the ones that don't know anything about robots and don't know how else to help. This is a great way for them to help. Again, the fundraiser for the host teams. Hosts are still encouraged to allow teams to bring in their own food, and you would think that would eat into your concessions, but it really doesn't. These kids will eat that lunch and then will still be hungry and will still come to the concession stand.
And we are working on a document that will cover, this as part of the volunteer food and other
Yep.
things, because there's also a way to be able to do team box order lunches and get those done. And again, that's a subset of parent. My husband does nothing with this. He runs that and that's his quick and dirty. So but it again is a whole subset of people that.
Really apply to me, I'm curious, do you have like data on like how much?
Oh, yeah. Oh, why? We have, oh, yes. And the numbers are disgusting.
Just finishing up, volunteer food, you get a stipend of $6,000 provided by First Chesapeake to provide these meals. It's basically breakfast and lunch, for the volunteers, and then a dinner on Friday. Drinks, snacks, you know, all those things, and taking care of dietary needs for the volunteers.
The meals on Friday
And then optionals for the setup volunteers, if you have them in really early in the morning, to make sure that you provide them some sort of lunch. And the same thing with the dinner on Sunday.
Just walking around here.
We provide support with volunteer recruitment and all that. And then we provide some of those key volunteers, and then we'll have support to provide for recruiting some of the other volunteers. I think that's. So if you're interested, that's the website. What it does basically is it's an interest form. So if you're interested, fill out the form. All that does is cue us that, yes, you might want to think about it. It'll cue us to do a site visit to make sure that your site is viable for it. And then we start conversations and then schedule and all those things.
We are looking for 2025, 2026. So if you are interested, let us know, so that way we can get ahead of the curve. Yeah.
I love that.
What's the latest?
Thank
I hope they're done.